Soft music, melancholic, traditional Japanese flute. Slow visuals of the Kamado family, warm firelight, mountain snow. Before we get to the chaos, you need to feel the calm. A boy, a mountain, a family that laughed too loud and loved too hard. Tanjiro Kamado had nothing fancy, no power, no special bloodline that anyone knew about, just a father who danced to drive away the cold, a mother who held everything together with quiet strength, and 5 younger siblings who needed him. That was his whole world. Small, warm enough. Music shifts, something heavier creeping in underneath. He didn't draw it out of malice, he drew it out of necessity. To Jiu Tomioka, this wasn't a unique tragedy, it was a Tuesday. Demons eat humans. Usually the first thing they eat is the family that stayed behind to hold them. It is a fundamental, inescapable biological law of this universe. The math is simple, brutal, and absolute. So Jiu moved to execute the math. But then the math broke. Tanjiro didn't do what ordinary victims do. He didn't just freeze, he didn't just run. First, he begged. He threw himself into the freezing snow, pressing his forehead against the dirt, screaming for the life of the only thing he had left. Jiu despised that. He erupted. It wasn't cruelty. It was a harsh, violent reprimand from a man who had seen too many people die on their knees. The weak have no rights and no choices. Stop handing your agency over to the thing holding the sword. And then Tanjiro did something that fundamentally shifted the trajectory of the entire Demon Slayer universe. He attacked. Not with blind, flailing panic. He attacked with a terrifying, cold, calculated desperation. He charged a Hashira, a man who moved like flowing water and hit like a tidal wave, knowing with absolute certainty that he was going to lose. He threw the rock, he rushed forward. Jiu knocked him unconscious with a single, effortless strike to the back of the neck. It was over, the boy was down. And then Jiu looked up. The heavy iron blade of Tanjiro's hatchet was spinning silently through the air, directly at Jiu's face. It buried itself in the trunk of the tree, a fraction of an inch from the Hashira's skull. Tanjiro hadn't charged to win the fight. He knew he couldn't. He charged to draw Jiu's attention downward, creating a lethal trap that would spring after his own defeat. If Jiu had been an ordinary swordsman, he would be dead. Jiu stared at the hatchet. Then the second impossible thing happened. The demon, the starving, freshly turned monster whose biology was screaming at her to consume human flesh to survive. She looked at the unconscious, bleeding boy in the snow. She didn't eat him. She stood over him, she bared her fangs at the water Hashira. She threw herself between the apex predator and her brother. She protected him. Jiu Tomioka, a man who had built his entire identity, his trauma, and his profession on the absolute, unbreakable rule that all demons are monsters, stood in the bloody snow and watched his worldview shatter. A human willing to die to kill a Hashira, a demon willing to die to protect a human. For the first time in a very long time, Jiu Tomioka made a choice that wasn't in the manual. He sheathed his sword. Hold on to it, because everything that follows depends on it. Jiu Tomioka found them at the edge of the mountain. Water Hashira, one of the 9 most powerful demon slayers alive. Cold eyes, no wasted words, and a blade that had ended hundreds of demons without hesitation. He looked at Nezuko, and he saw exactly what she was. A demon. His sword came out. Blade leaving sheath. Now in the original story, this is the moment Tanjiro throws himself in front of her. Begs, fights, shows Jiu something in his eyes that makes the Hashira pause. But we're not in the original story anymore. Because someone else arrived first. Heavy silence, a single footstep in the snow. No announcement, no flash of light, no dramatic entrance. Just a young man stepping out from between the trees, like he had always been standing there. Dark eyes, quiet face, a presence that made Jiu, a Hashira, go completely still without understanding why. Yuta Okkotsu. He had arrived in this world minutes ago. No map, no context, no idea where he was or what century this was. His cursed energy was still settling around him like static after lightning. He saw Tanjiro on the ground, he saw the girl in Tanjiro's arms, and his cursed energy, ancient, massive, barely leashed, felt the demon blood in Nezuko like a live wire. Rika reacted before Yuta could think. 1 second. That was all it took. Nezuko was gone. Tanjiro didn't scream right away. That's the part nobody talks about when something truly catastrophic happens, the few seconds where the brain simply refuses to process it, where you're looking at the thing in front of you and some part of your mind keeps insisting there must be a mistake. He just stared. Then the sound came out of him. Not. A word, not her name, something underneath language, raw and animal and completely broken. Jiu stepped back. Even this Hashira, a man trained to feel nothing during a kill, looked away. Yuta stood completely frozen. Here is what makes Yuta Okkotsu dangerous and deeply human at the same time. He acts on instinct when people are threatened. He saw a demon. Rika moved. It was over before his conscious mind caught up. But he has a conscious mind. And now it was working. He looked at Tanjiro's face, the absolute wreckage of it. He looked at the girl on the ground. He looked at the way Tanjiro was holding her like putting her down would make it permanent. And something in Yuta's chest cracked open. He had lost someone once too. He knew this exact sound. Music returns low, heavy, building slowly. Yuta didn't stand up. He didn't shift into a defensive stance. He didn't reach for the katana strapped to his back. He just stayed kneeling in the bloody snow, staring at his own hands as if he were still getting used to what they could do. I'm a student, Yuta said. Jiu's grip on his Nichiren blade tightened by a fraction of a millimeter. That is not an answer. It's the truth. Yuta finally looked up at the water Hashira. His eyes were dark, ringed with exhaustion, carrying the specific, heavy gravity of a boy who had already survived his own execution. I'm a Jujutsu sorcerer. Jiu processed the words, Jujutsu sorcerer, meaningless. But the energy radiating off the boy wasn't meaningless. If Jiu drew his blade right now, his instincts, the exact same instincts that kept him breathing against upper moons, told him precisely how it would end. The math hadn't just broken, it had rewritten itself into a language Jiu couldn't read. The pressure coming off the boy wasn't aggressive, it was just present. It was like standing at the base of a dormant volcano and seriously debating whether to hit it with a stick. Tanjiro took a ragged, freezing breath. His sense of smell was absolute, it never lied. It told him the emotional truth of the world, but what he smelled coming off this stranger, it broke his mind. Demons smelled like rot, like malice and old blood and violent hunger. This boy didn't smell like a demon. He smelled like pure concentrated human sorrow. He smelled like grief so heavy it had its own physical mass. And underneath that, buried just beneath the boy's skin, coiled tightly in his shadow, Tanjiro smelled something so unimaginably violent, so monstrously vast, that his lungs physically seized. He wasn't a demon, but he was walking around with a god-level monster tethered to his soul. Jiu slowly, deliberately, let his hand drop away from his hilt. You healed a demon, Jiu repeated. His voice dropped an octave, stripping away the professional detachment, leaving only the grim, bloody reality of the world they lived in. Do you have any idea what she is going to do when she gets hungry? Yuta looked down at Nezuko. She was breathing softly, her unnatural claws digging weakly into Tanjiro's checkered haori. He looked at Tanjiro's desperate, shaking hands wrapped around his sister. Then the shadow behind Yuta seemed to stretch, just an inch. The temperature in the clearing plummeted. She won't, Yuta said. It wasn't a prediction, it wasn't a hope. It was a guarantee. One hand gripping his sister's sleeve, the other pressed flat against the snow like he needed to feel the ground beneath him. Jiu had his hand on his blade but wasn't drawing it. His eyes moved between the girl, breathing, alive, demon, and this stranger kneeling in the snow who had just done something that should not be possible. Yuta sat back on his heels. Exhausted, not physically, spiritually. That technique cost something every single time. He looked at Tanjiro. I'm sorry, he said. 3 words, quiet, no excuse attached, no explanation offered first. Just the apology, clean and direct, because Yuta understood that sometimes that's the only thing worth saying. Tanjiro stared at him. Then at Nezuko. Then back. A demon, he whispered. You healed a demon. Yuta said nothing. Because the answer was yes, and he already knew it was going to change everything about how this world saw him. Jiyu finally spoke. His voice was flat, controlled, professional. What are you? Yuta looked up at him. And for the first time since arriving in this world, he smiled, small, tired, honest. I'm still figuring that out myself. Something new enters the score, curiosity, possibility, a thread pulling forward. Freeze frame on Yuta's face. 3 people in the snow, one who just lost everything, one who just broke the only rule his entire world runs on, and one who had never once seen a demon brought back from the edge of death. This story just got complicated, and we are only getting started. Music tense, slow burn, traditional strings with something modern underneath, like 2 worlds trying to exist in the same key. Nobody invited him. That's the first thing to understand about how this alliance started. No handshake, no agreement, no moment where Tanjiro looked at this stranger and said, yes, travel with us. It just happened, the way disasters happen, the way storms roll in while you're still deciding whether to bring an umbrella. Yuta followed them down the mountain. Not aggressively, not with demands. He simply walked behind them at a respectful distance, hands in his pockets, cursed energy pulled tight against his body like a man trying to make himself smaller in a crowded room. Tanjiro didn't tell him to leave. He didn't have the energy. Nezuko was alive. That was the only thing his brain could hold right now. Everything else, the stranger, the power, the impossible thing that had just happened in the snow, could wait until his sister was safe and breathing and real. Jiyu walked ahead of both of them. Silent, rigid thinking. Slow zoom on Jiyu's back as he walks. His hand never moves far from his blade. Here is what Jiyu Tomioka was processing. He had spent years training to read threats, breathing patterns, muscle tension, the way a person's weight shifts before they attack. Every Hashira develops this, a 6th sense sharpened by surviving fights that should have killed them. Yuta triggered every single one of those instincts. And not in a way Jiyu could explain. Demons felt like rot, like something natural gone wrong, like fruit left out too long, sweet at first, then deeply, unmistakably wrong. Yuta felt like nothing Jiyu had a word for. Not demonic, not human in the ordinary sense, something compressed, something that had been put under enormous pressure for a very long time and had not broken but had changed shape entirely because of it. Dangerous, his instincts said. But dangerous the way a dam is dangerous, not because it wants to destroy anything, because of what happens if the structure ever gives way. Jiyu kept walking, but his eyes never fully left the stranger behind him. Tanjiro finally spoke around sunset. Not to ask who Yuta was, not to thank him, he wasn't ready for that yet, and Yuta seemed to understand this without being told. Where are you going? Tanjiro asked. Yuta considered this genuinely. I don't know, he said, I don't know this place at all. Tanjiro turned to look at him properly for the first time since the mountain. This is a thing about Tanjiro Kamado that separates him from almost every other character in his world. He listens with his nose. Emotions leave traces. Grief smells a specific way. Anger has its own signature. Lies carry a sourness that honest feelings don't. He breathed in. Confusion, exhaustion, guilt heavy and genuine, sitting on Yuta like a coat soaked through with rain. And underneath all of it, something ancient, something so large Tanjiro couldn't find the edges of it. A presence attached to this person that wasn't him but moved when he moved, breathed when he breathed, watched through his eyes. Tanjiro went very still. You're not alone, he said quietly, are you? Not a question. Yuta looked at him for a long moment. No, he said, I'm not. Music drops to NEAR silence, single low note holds. Jiyu stopped walking. He had heard every word. Explain, he said, one word, final, like a door closing. Yuta took a slow breath. How do you explain Rika to someone who has never heard of cursed energy, who has no framework for what a special grade spirit even is, whose entire understanding of supernatural power runs on oxygen and blade geometry? Think of her as a guardian, Yuta said carefully. She moves when I'm threatened. She acted before I could stop her on the mountain. That's on me. I should have had better control. Jiyu's eyes were flat and unreadable. A guardian, he repeated. Yes, that killed a child in under a second. The words landed like stones dropping into still water. Yuta didn't flinch away from them. He absorbed each one. Yes, he said again. Silent. Then Jiyu did something unexpected. He turned back to the path and kept walking. Stay behind me, he said, both of you, and if that thing moves without warning again, I won't hesitate. It wasn't acceptance, it wasn't forgiveness. It was the only pragmatic choice available to a man who had just watched a stranger revive the dead and was smart enough to know he couldn't fight something he didn't understand yet. Tanjiro exhaled, Yuta followed. The mountain got darker around all three of them. Urokodaki's house sat at the foot of a different mountain, wrapped in cedar trees and the particular quiet of a place where serious things had happened and been absorbed into the wood and stone over many years. The old man was waiting at the door when they arrived. This was not unusual. Sakanji Urokodaki had trained enough students to develop an instinct for arrival, footsteps, breathing patterns, the weight of people carrying hard things. He felt them coming long before he saw them. 3 sets of feet, one familiar, Jiyu, measured and controlled, one new, a boy carrying grief like a physical object strapped to his back, and one. Urokodaki went still on the porch. Something was wrong. Not wrong the way demons were wrong, this was different, deeper. The air around the third person moved differently, the way air moves around something that displaces too much of it, like standing next to a waterfall and feeling the pressure change in your chest. His hand found his blade without conscious thought. Then Jiyu came through the tree line and Urokodaki read his former student's body language in an instant. Not fleeing, not fighting, controlled discomfort, the specific posture of a man walking next to a live grenade he has chosen, for now, not to throw. Urokodaki's hand stayed on his blade, but he didn't draw it. Yet, Yuta stopped at the edge of the property. He could feel it, the boundary, not a physical one, something older, the kind of spiritual weight that accumulates in a place where a person has poured decades of discipline and intention into the ground beneath them. Sakanji Urokodaki had made this land an extension of himself, and it was pushing back against Yuta's energy the way two magnets push when you bring the wrong ends together. You feel that too, Tanjiro said quietly beside him. Yeah, Yuta said. Urokodaki descended the porch steps slowly. He stopped 3 feet from Yuta and simply stood there, reading, processing, doing in 30 seconds what most people couldn't do in 30 minutes. Then he spoke. You carry something that was never meant for this world. Not a question, not an accusation, an observation, delivered the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis, clearly, without cruelty, without flinching. Yuta met his gaze. I know, he said. It saved that girl, Urokodaki said, nodding toward Nezuko. Yes, it also ended her. Yes. The old man was quiet for a long moment. Behind his mask, his eyes moved over Yuta with the specific attention of someone who has spent a lifetime learning the difference between threats that can be managed and threats that cannot. Come inside, he finally said. And then lower, quiet enough that only Yuta heard it. But understand something, young man, I have buried students. I have faced demons older than your great-grandparents, and in 50 years, I have never once felt what I feel standing next to you. He paused on the step. Muzan Kibutsuji wants to consume this world. What you carry could erase it. Phrase on Yuta's face. There it was. The question nobody had said out loud yet, the one Jiu had been turning over since the mountain, the one sitting behind Tanjiro's eyes every time he looked at this stranger who saved his sister and scared every powerful person around him without even trying. Muzan was the enemy the Demon Slayer Corps had organized their entire existence around. A single target, the source, the original demon. But what do you do when someone arrives in your world carrying power that operates on a completely different level? Power that heals and destroys with equal ease. Power attached to something ancient and enormous that even its owner can't fully control. What do you do when the answer to your greatest threat might be an even greater one? Tanjiro looked at Yuta, Yuta looked at the door. Neither of them had an answer. Not yet. Music eerie hollow wind, the mountain breathes, wisteria trees glow pale purple in moonlight. Dozens of candidates stand at the gate, nervous, small against the dark. Every story has a crucible. A place where raw material gets tested, where heat separates what's real from what only looked real, where the people who were always going to survive reveal themselves, and the ones who weren't get swallowed by the dark before the first night ends. For Demon Slayer Corps recruits, that place is Mount Fujikasen. 7 days, no rescue, no weapons beyond what you carried in. The mountain held demons that the Corps had captured over decades, creatures too dangerous to kill cleanly, too useful as a test to waste. They had been trapped here behind wisteria borders and left to feed on whoever arrived every year wearing the uniform of someone who wanted to be a slayer. Most candidates didn't make it out. That was not a secret, that was the point. Tanjiro stood at the gate and breathed through it, the fear, the grief still raw from everything before this, the weight of knowing Nezuko was waiting somewhere safe while he climbed toward things that wanted to eat him. Beside him, Yuta Okkotsu looked up at the mountain. And the mountain looked back. The first demon hit within 4 minutes. Not at Tanjiro, at a cluster of candidates 50 meters to the east, 3 recruits who had barely cleared the tree line before something large and fast came out of the dark and took the slowest one before anyone could react. Screaming, running, the specific chaos of people who trained for danger suddenly standing in Sid. Why it? Tanjiro moved toward the sound. Yuta was already there. No sprint, no dramatic leap. One moment he wasn't beside the demon, the next he was cursed energy crackling off him in waves that bent the air like heat off summer asphalt. The demon turned toward this new presence with the particular hunger of a creature that has eaten many things and recognized immediately that this one was different. It had half a second to feel confused. Then it was gone. Not defeated, not overpowered after a struggle, gone. Like a candle someone pinched out with 2 fingers. The surviving candidates stared at the empty space where something enormous had just been standing. Yuta looked down at his hand, flexed his fingers once, kept moving. Here is what nobody tells you about watching someone truly powerful operate in a space built around the concept of struggle. It breaks something. Final selection existed for a reason, not cruelty, though it looked like cruelty from the outside. The mountain was a filter, yes, but it was also a forge. Every candidate who survived their first demon encounter came out the other side changed in a specific way, a little faster, a little harder, the fear not gone but relocated from the chest to somewhere more useful. The mountain taught you what you were made of because it had no choice but to. Yuta removed the lesson. Everywhere he moved, demons collapsed, not after fights before them. His cursed energy radiated outward like a second atmosphere, and the demons on this mountain, old and powerful as they were, reacted to it the way small animals react to a predator so far above them on the food chain that fleeing doesn't even register as an option, they simply shut down. Candidates who should have spent 7 days bleeding and adapting and discovering the edges of their own courage, instead spent 7 days walking behind a stranger who made everything easy. Tanjiro felt it, the wrongness of it, he just didn't have words for it yet. Deep in the mountain, night 3, torchlight flickering. The hand demon found them on the 3rd night. In the original story, the real one, the one that left marks, this creature was a reckoning. 13 years of trapped hatred, Urokodaki's students, dozens of them, absorbed into something that had been given too long to fester and too many reasons to enjoy it. The hand demon wasn't just powerful, it was the mountain's memory of every wrong thing the core had ever done by leaving it alive. It had a speech prepared, it had names memorized, it had been waiting. Tanjiro heard it coming. The weight of it, the size, the particular spiritual pressure of a demon that has lived long enough to become something almost like a concept rather than a creature. His grip tightened on his blade, his breathing shifted, water breathing, first form, body aligning itself without conscious instruction because Urokodaki had put it that deep into his muscles. He was ready. He was about to find out what he was. Then Yuta stepped forward. One beat of silence. 3 seconds. That's how long it took. The hand demon, 13 years of hatred, hundreds of absorbed lives, the mountain's apex predator, had 3 seconds from the moment Yuta's full attention landed on it to the moment it ceased to exist. No speech, no names, no final words about Sabito and Makomo. No moment where Tanjiro stood over something dying and learned the specific weight of ending a life that had once been human. Just nothing, space where something enormous used to be. Tanjiro stood with his sword half drawn. His breathing was still in first form. His body had been ready for the most important fight of his young life. The fight never came. He stood there for a long time, blade halfway out, staring at the empty dark where the hand demon had been, waiting for something that was already over. Yuta turned around. He saw Tanjiro's face, and something in his own expression, just for a moment, broke. This is the part that matters most, more than the power, more than the demons, more than any of the mechanics of what Yuta can do. Tanjiro Kamado was supposed to stand over the hand demon's fading body and feel the full weight of what this journey cost. He was supposed to grieve Sabito and Makomo through that creature's death, children he never met but whose sacrifice paved the path he was walking. He was supposed to learn that killing, even killing monsters, takes something from you that doesn't fully come back. That moment was the first stone in the foundation of who Tanjiro becomes. Yuta had just removed it. Not out of cruelty, not even out of carelessness. Out of the same instinct that had moved Rika on the mountain, threat identified, threat removed, the people nearby kept safe. But safety and growth are not the same thing. Tanjiro needed that fight, not to survive it, to be changed by it. Now he would arrive at the other side of final selection with his body intact and something essential missing. A specific kind of hardness that only comes from standing in the dark against something that wants to kill you and choosing, in that moment, to be the thing that doesn't break. The question this entire video has been building toward just sharpened into focus. What happens to a hero when someone removes all the suffering that was supposed to make him one? Morning came. The officials at the gate counted the survivors, then counted again. The number was wrong, too high, far too high for a normal selection. Word moved through the core fast, something had happened on that mountain, something that didn't fit any previous record, candidates emerging without major injuries, demons absent from entire sections of terrain, a survival rate that should have been statistically impossible. The officials looked at the group of survivors. Their eyes landed on one face in particular, a young man standing slightly apart from the others, quiet, unhurt, radiating something that made the nearest official take 3 involuntary steps backward before catching himself. Tanjiro stood nearby, staring at his own hands. Zenitsu was crying, though nobody was completely sure why, since he was alive. Inosuke was furious, since the mountain hadn't given him a single real fight. But Tanjiro just stared at his hands, thinking about a sword that never fully left its sheath, thinking about a fight that was supposed to teach him something, thinking about what it means to be protected by someone so far above you that your own strength becomes irrelevant. Jiyu stood at the edge of the tree line, watching Yuta, arms crossed. Beside him, a message hawk had already left for the Yubayashiki estate. The Demon Slayer Corps needed to know. Something had entered their world. something that saved lives with one hand and quietly dismantled everything those saved lives were supposed to become with the other. And nobody, not Jiyu, not Urokodaki, not the officials counting survivors with shaking hands, had any idea what to do about it. Some places announce themselves. You feel them before you see them, a drop in temperature, a shift in the air, the particular silence of a forest where the birds stopped singing weeks ago and never came back. Mount Natagumo was that kind of place. Not loud about it, not dramatic, just quietly, completely wrong in a way that settled into your chest the moment you crossed the tree line and didn't leave. The Corps had sent a team ahead, none of them came back. What returned instead were reports from the Edge's slayers who had made it close enough to see the webs before something grabbed their comrades and pulled them into the dark. Spider threads thin as whispers and strong as iron cable, laced between every tree on the mountain like something enormous had decided to gift-wrap the entire forest and was still in the process. Tanjiro felt the wrongness immediately. The smell hit him first, layers of it. Fear, blood, something chemical underneath, like venom metabolized into the air itself. Beside him, Yuta looked up through the canopy. His eyes moved slowly across the web lines above them, tracking, calculating. "How many?" Tanjiro asked. "More than I can count from here," Yuta said, "and something bigger, much further up." He didn't say it with dread. He said it the way a surgeon describes a difficult procedure, clinical, present, already working through the steps. That calm scared Tanjiro more than the mountain did. Split the mountain dividesthem, zenitsu left, inosuke center, tanjiro and yuta ascending. The threads found them within 60 seconds of entry. Thin lines dropping from the canopy like fishing wire, patient, almost gentle, the way a trap is gentle right up until it isn't. Slayers further down the path were already moving wrong, their bodies hijacked by whatever controlled the threads, limbs bending at angles that human joints weren't built for. Tanjiro started toward them. Yuta raised one hand. Not aggressively, not a command, just a gesture, small, precise. The cursed energy came off him in a single low pulse, barely visible, the way heat distorts air above a road in summer. It moved outward from his center in a clean ring, and every thread it passed through simply ceased to exist, not cut, not broken. Dissolved like salt dropped into warm water, gone between one moment and the next. The controlled slayers dropped, confused, stumbling, suddenly back inside their own bodies. One of them looked up at Yuta with an expression caught between relief and pure animal terror. "Don't move yet," Yuta told him. "There are more above." He was already looking up when he said it, already calculating the next problem. Already 3 steps ahead of a mountain that had no idea what had just walked into it. Deeper into the mountain, webs thickening, screaming from somewhere above. The healing happened the way everything Yuta did happened, without announcement, without ceremony, like breathing. A slayer pinned against a tree by 3 threads through his shoulder. Another collapsed at the base of a cedar, a web-induced venom working through her system, her breathing shallow and wrong. Yuta moved between them. Reverse cursed technique deployed with a precision that would have made Shoko Yiri stare, targeted bursts of positive energy, enough to close wounds and counteract foreign toxins without flooding the whole system. Not wasteful, not showy. The minimum necessary, applied exactly where it needed to go. Tanjiro watched a woman breathe normally for the first time in what looked like hours. Her eyes opened. She looked at her healed shoulder with complete incomprehension. "What are you?" she whispered. The same question Jiyu had asked on the mountain, the same question Urokodaki had asked at his door, growing into a pattern now, every powerful person in this world eventually arriving at those 3 words when Yuta entered their field of vision. He didn't answer her either, just helped her to her feet and kept climbing. Above them, deeper in the web, something massive shifted, something that had felt the dissolving of its threads like phantom pain, something that was now paying attention. The SHIKIGAMI field Yuta deploys something nobody in this world has a name for. Halfway up the mountain, Yuta stopped. The surviving slayers had clustered behind him and Tanjiro, drawn by instinct toward the only thing on this mountain that the webs weren't touching. A small army of wounded, shaken people who had come here expecting death and found something stranger instead. Stay in a group, Yuta said. Don't go past the marked trees. What marked trees? One of them asked. Yuta pressed 2 fingers to the ground. The energy moved outward in a slow, deliberate wave, not aggressive, not a weapon this time. A boundary, a field, invisible to everyone watching but felt by all of them, a subtle pressure shift like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air decides. Shikigami deployed at the perimeter, not Rika, something smaller, something specifically constructed for this purpose. Shapes that existed halfway between this world and somewhere else, sitting at intervals around the grouped slayers like sentinels that couldn't be cut because they weren't fully present. Tanjiro felt them, not threatening, protective. Like Yuta had drawn a circle around every person he decided was his responsibility and dared the mountain to cross it. That's what is that, Tanjiro breathed. A holding pattern, Yuta said, already moving upward. It'll give them 30 minutes, should be enough. Enough for what? Yuta looked back over his shoulder. To finish this. Music changes something ancient, something that recognizes its opposite when it arrives. Lower Moon 5. Roy. He looked like a child, pale face, red-tipped hair, eyes that had been old for a long time, wearing a young person's face like a costume that no longer quite fit. Threads drifted around him in lazy orbits, responding to his mood the way weather responds to pressure systems, slowly, inevitably, without mercy. He had built a family here, his word for it. A structure of fear and obligation held together by threads through flesh, and a definition of love so broken it had forgotten what the original shape was. Tanjiro smelled it the moment they entered the clearing, the grief underneath everything. The specific rot of a creature that had wanted something real and settled for a counterfeit so long ago it could no longer tell the difference. He felt the familiar pull, that Tanjiro Kamado-specific response to the sorrow inside a demon, the part of him that understood that every monster had once been something else. He stepped forward. Yuta's arm came up across his chest. Don't, Yuta said quietly. Not unkind, just certain. RUISTHRADS launched the sky above the clearing, becomes a loom. The threads came from everywhere at once. Not a test, not a warning. Everything Rui had, every thread on the mountain redirected, pulled back to this single point, a closing fist of razor wire that had bisected every other opponent before they finished their first breath in this clearing. The air itself became a weapon, the sky above filled with a lattice so dense it blocked the moonlight. Tanjiro dove left. Yuta looked up and smiled. Not cruelly, something quieter. The expression of someone who has spent years learning to exist alongside power so enormous it could unmake things, and has therefore stopped being impressed by power that merely cuts. He exhaled. The cursed energy came off him differently this time. Not a pulse, not a field. Directionality, upward, outward, filling the space above the clearing the way water fills a container, rising to meet the threads from below rather than waiting for them to arrive. The lattice buckled. Rui's eyes went wide. He pulled, the reflex of a creature who had never once had his threads resisted, who had built his entire understanding of Pow. Are on the premise that nothing in this world could match the tensile strength of what he carried. The threads didn't snap, they redirected. Yuta had simply changed the geometry of the space, bent the field itself so that every thread Rui commanded pointed somewhere other than where Rui intended. Not overpowered, rerouted, like redirecting a river not by damming it but by tilting the ground it runs on. Rui stood completely still. For the first time in decades, something that felt dangerously close to fear. What are you? He said. Third time on this mountain, the question this world kept asking. Someone who's seen worse than you, Yuta said. He didn't say it as a taunt, it was simply true, and somehow that was more frightening than any threat could have been. Rui launched everything. The full depth of a lower moon's power, every thread, every manipulation, every technique refined over decades of surviving on a mountain where survival meant being the most dangerous thing present. It lasted 11 seconds. Yuta moved through it the way water moves through a hand, not by matching it, not by overpowering it, but by occupying a category of existence that the threads simply had no language for. Rika came forward once fully. The clearing went silent. Rui was gone. Not defeated in the way this world understood defeat, no final words, no fading curse, no moment of redemption or recognition, just concluded, like a sentence that had been going on too long. Tanjiro stood at the edge of the clearing, sword drawn, never used. Again. He stared at the space where Rui had been, remembering the grief inside that demon, the broken definition of family, the thing that had wanted something real. Nobody would ever know that now, no final breath, no dissolution into the dawn, no chance for whatever remained of the human underneath to surface at the end. Yuta had been thorough, Yuta had been efficient, Yuta had been, by every measurable standard, exactly what this mountain needed. Tanjiro put his sword away, said nothing, felt something close, something that used to be open. Thunder of footsteps, the Hashira arrive. They came fast. Flame, stone, serpent, wind, water, 5 Hashira descending on Mount Natagumo, with the collective force of people who had spent years earning the right to be the strongest thing in any room they entered. They arrived ready, weapons drawn, breathing forms activated, eyes scanning for the spider-demon threat that the message hawks had described. They found survivors, healed, sitting in a circle around invisible boundary markers, confused but alive. They found a clearing at the summit, empty, webless, quiet. They found Tanjiro sitting on a rock, staring at nothing. And they found Yuta, standing in the center of the clearing, hands in his pockets, watching them arrive with the patient expression of someone who had been expecting this conversation for a while. Rengoku spoke first, because Rengoku always spoke first. What happened here? His voice enormous, filling the entire mountain, the specific volume of a man who had never once in his life felt the need to modulate. Yuta looked around the empty clearing, back at Rengoku. It's handled, he said. Silent. 9 of the most powerful demon slayers alive standing in a clearing that should have been the site of a major battle, standing in the aftermath of something none of them had witnessed, looking at a young man who didn't look like a threat, who felt like the end of the world. Shinobu's fan covered her mouth. Jaiomai's prayer beads moved faster. Seinmi's hand tightened on his blade so hard his knuckles went white. Jiu stood at the back of the group, said nothing, because he had already been here, already asked the question, already gotten the answer that wasn't an answer. He watched his fellow Hashira arrive at the moment he had been standing in since a snowy mountain and a boy who smelled like grief. The moment where you realize the thing protecting you and the thing you should fear most are wearing the same face. The Hashira arranged in a semicircle like a court that has already decided the verdict and is waiting for the defendant to confirm it. Power without origin is the most dangerous thing in any world. Not because it can't be matched, because it can't be categorized. Every system built around fighting evil depends on one foundational assumption, that evil follows rules, that it has a shape, that the people protecting everyone else have spent enough time studying that shape to know where its edges are and how to cut along them. Muzan broke that assumption once, became the original demon, rewrote the rules of what a human body could become, and the Corps spent 3 centuries building new systems around the new shape of the threat. Now something had arrived that broke the assumption again, and this time nobody had 3 centuries to adjust. The trial wasn't a formality. Every Hashira in that room understood this, what stood in front. Of them wasn't a demon, wasn't a slayer, wasn't anything the combined knowledge of 9 of the most experienced fighters alive could name. And unnamed things in a world built on knowing your enemy were the most terrifying category of all. The room UBUISHIKI, a state every HASHRA present YUTA, stands in the center. He is not bound, not restrained. The decision not to restrain him was itself a debate that took 40 minutes. Seinmi Shinazugawa moved first. Of course he did. Wind Hashira, scar tissue from temple to jaw on the left side, eyes that had decided most questions about strangers before the strangers finished their first sentence. He crossed the distance between his position and Yuta's in 4 steps, close enough that any normal person would have stepped back. Yuta didn't move. Let's skip the formal part, Seinmi said. His voice was flat, ground down to its functional minimum. You walked into a mountain that killed trained slayers. You walked out with the demons already dead. You healed injuries that should have taken weeks. You put something around our people that nobody could see or cut. He lined in. So tell me right now, what do you want from us? Yuta met his eyes without difficulty. Nothing, he said. Everyone wants something. I want to understand where I am, Yuta said, and I want to help, that's it. Both of those things are true at the same time. Seinmi stared at him, searching for the lie, finding the unsettling absence of one. He stepped back, said nothing, which from Seinmi Shinazugawa was approximately equivalent to a standing ovation from anyone else. Obanai Aguro didn't raise his voice. Never did. Calm was his weapon, the specific calmness of someone who had decided long ago that volume was inefficient and precision was everything. You revived a demon, he said. The room temperature dropped 2 degrees. Intentionally or not, you used your power to restore life to a creature that kills humans, a creature our entire organization exists to destroy. Whatever your reasoning, whatever your origin, his mismatched eyes moved over Yuta without warmth. That action alone is grounds for execution under core law, not trial, execution. Nobody disagreed, the silence confirmed it. Tanjiro, standing at the edge of the room, opened his mouth. He also brought her back, he said. Obanai turned slowly toward him, the serpent tightened. Twice in one morning, Tanjiro continued. His voice didn't waver. He ended her and brought her back and apologized. All 3. Nobody here has ever done the 3rd one. Silent. Obanai had no answer for that, not because the argument was legally valid, because it was human, and humanity kept finding gaps in legal frameworks that pure logic couldn't close. He looked away first. Shinobu steps forward. The energy in the room shifts less hostile, more curious. Shinobu Kacho moved like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. Everything before her had been blunt, direct questions, direct hostility, the Hashira language of people who fought things with their bodies and communicated the same way. She was something different, smiling, which in this room at this moment was more unsettling than any of the anger. The healing, she said. Not a question, an opening. The slayer on the East Ridge, punctured lung, wisteria thread venom in the bloodstream, blood loss severe enough that she shouldn't have been conscious. You closed the wound and neutralized the toxin in under 30 seconds. She tilted her head. I've spent 11 years developing poisons and their antidotes. The venom those threads carry took me 3 years to fully analyze. You had no reference sample, no preparation time, no tools. Her smile didn't move. Held. One word, carrying the weight of 11 years of work inside it. Yuta was quiet for a moment. Positive energy, he said, the reverse of what I normally use. Life force, directed precisely. It doesn't treat the specific toxin, it restores the body's ability to fight it itself. Shinobu stared at him. Something shifted behind her eyes, not softening exactly. Recognition, the specific expression of a scientist who has just been handed a piece of information that retroactively explains a dozen things she couldn't explain before. Fascinating, she said softly. Seinmi from across the room, don't. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying, don't. He had been present the entire time. Sitting at the far end of the room, eyes closed, listening with the particular attention of a man who has spent his entire life compensating for a failing body by developing senses that bodies don't usually come with. When Kaguya Yubayashiki spoke, the Hashira didn't just go quiet, they went still. The specific stillness of people in the presence of someone they would walk into fire for without being asked. Tell us where you came from, he said. Gentle, absolute. Yuta exhaled. And told them. Not everything, not Rika's full histo. Rise, some wounds don't open in front of strangers, but the shape of it, another world, a different system of supernatural power built around negative human emotion made physical, cursed energy, cursed spirits, sorcerers who spent their lives fighting invisible things that fed on the worst of what humans felt. A war with no public face, an organization built in the shadows, a teacher he had lost. That last part he said it quietly, looking at the floor just for a second. Then back up. The Hashira listened, some with skepticism, some with recognition, the shape of what he described, the hidden war, the cost of it, the way it hollowed people out, that shape they all knew, just wearing different clothes. Rengoku had been leaning forward since the third sentence, eyes blazing, the expression of a man receiving information that set something on fire inside him. In your world, he said, the sorcerers, did they fight with their hearts fully ablaze? Yuta looked at him. The best ones did, he said. Rengoku sat back, satisfied, as if that answered every remaining question he had. Seinmi wanted him contained, Obanai wanted him removed, Jaiomai wanted 3 days of prayer before any decision. Mitsuri wanted to know if the positive energy thing worked on emotional wounds and received 11 stares of varying intensity in response. Muakairo had already stopped paying attention and was watching a moth on the ceiling. Shinobu wanted him studied. She phrased it more diplomatically than that, but studied was what she meant. Jiu said nothing. He had been saying nothing since they arrived, standing at the edge of the semicircle, arms folded, watching Yuta with the expression of a man completing a calculation that started on a snowy mountain and had been running in the background ever since. Yubayashiki waited, let the argument exhaust itself, the way rivers exhaust rapids before reaching still water. Then he raised one hand. Silence immediate, complete. He arrived in this world without invitation, Yubayashiki said. He has healed our people, eliminated threats beyond our current capacity, and been honest about his nature when dishonesty would have been far safer for him. He paused. He is also, as every person in this room has felt since he entered it, operating at a level that makes our existing ranking system functionally irrelevant. Seinmi made a sound. Yubayashiki's gaze moved to him briefly. The sound stopped. We do not contain what we cannot contain, Yubayashiki continued. We do not ignore what we cannot ignore, and we do not waste what the world has sent us, regardless of which world it was sent from. He looked at Yuta. The question is not whether you belong here. Clearly, for reasons none of us understand yet, you do. The question is what shape that belonging takes. Nobody had used the word Hashira yet. It sat in the room anyway, the way conclusions sit in a room before anyone says them out loud. Rengoku said it first, because Rengoku. Spirit Hashira. His voice, every inch of that enormous warmth behind it. A rank for a power we have no existing name for, a position that acknowledges what he is without pretending we understand it, and a responsibility. He looked at Yuta directly, because rank without responsibility is just decoration. Yuta stood very still. He had been the special grade sorcerer, the strongest after Gojo, the one people looked at with fear wrapped around their respect. This felt different. These people didn't know his history, didn't know what Rika had done before she became what she was now, didn't know about the bodies, the hospital, the years of being the boy everyone was afraid to walk past. They were offering him something clean, a title with no blood on it yet. Seinmi crossed his arms. I want it on record that I object. Noted, said Yubayashiki. I also want it on record, Seinmi continued, his voice dropping half a register, that if he gives me a reason, one reason, I won't wait for a trial. Yuta looked at him. That's fair, he said. Seinmi blinked. He had expected argument, justification, the specific defensiveness of the powerful when challenged. Not agreement. Not calm. Not the quiet of someone who had already accepted the cost of what they were. He didn't say anything else, but something behind his eyes shifted, almost imperceptibly. Almost. Yubayashiki smiled. Then it is decided. Welcome to the Demon Slayer Corps. He paused, one breath, spirit Hashira. Outside the estate, the wind moved through the wisteria. Purple petals fell in the dark. The mountain where Rui used to live was silent for the first time in years. Somewhere in a box near the estate entrance, a newly forged blade sat wrapped in cloth, waiting, its color undecided, like everything about the person it was made for. Music rolling, rhythmic, mechanical, steel on rails. The Muzan train cuts through the dark like a thought nobody finished. 200 passengers, one demon, and something abo. Ard that the demon has no framework for yet. Dreams are the kindest trap. Not because they're subtle, because they're generous. They give you exactly what you want, everything you lost, everyone you miss, the version of your life that didn't have the specific shape of damage yours actually has. Enmu understood this, Lower Moon 1, the last surviving member of the 12 Kizuki after Muzan purged the rest. His power wasn't strength, it was architecture. The ability to build a world inside a sleeping mind so warm, so complete, so much better than the real one that the person inside it simply chose not to come back. Against ordinary slayers, this was absolute. You couldn't fight what you couldn't recognize as a cage. Against Tanjiro, it took longer than expected. Against Rengoku, it found bedrock, a mind so filled with purpose and fire that contentment had nowhere to take root. Against Yuta, it lasted 11 seconds. Not because Yuta's life had no losses to offer, it had more than most. Because Yuta Okkotsu had spent years living in the space between waking and something worse, had learned to feel the difference between a real presence and a constructed one the way a blind person learns to read a room through sound. The dream showed him Rika, young, alive, smiling the way she used to before everything. He stood in it for 11 seconds, then he opened his eyes, and the dream broke like glass dropped on stone. Finding the others took 6 minutes. Tanjiro fighting his way back from something warm and devastating, the smell of his family still on the dream. Inosuke already halfway out through sheer chaotic stubbornness, his mind too feral and nonlinear for Enmu's architecture to fully hold. Zenitsu asleep inside a dream, smiling, utterly unreachable by conventional means. Yuta stood over Zenitsu, looked at the sleeping face, sighed once. The cursed energy moved precisely, a single targeted pulse, just enough to introduce static into the dream frequency without damaging the dreamer. Zenitsu sat up like a man remembering he left the stove on, looked around wildly, saw Yuta, immediately grabbed his sleeve. "I was having the best dream," he said. "I know," Yuta said, "that was the problem." He was already moving, toward the front of the train, toward the part of this problem that dreaming wasn't responsible for. Enmu felt him coming, felt the cursed energy cutting through every thread of sleep like a candle flame moving through spiderwebs, felt something it had not felt in the entire span of its existence as a lower moon. Genuine uncertainty. It began constructing deeper dreams, faster, desperate. Yuta dissolved them as quickly as they formed, walking forward the entire time, unhurried, inevitable. Rengoku was already there. Because of course he was, the flame Hashira did not wait for situations to develop. He arrived at situations and made them resolve. His blade had found the junction between Enmu's consciousness and the train's structure, the place where the demon had fused itself with the engine, making the separation of demon from train a surgical problem rather than a combat one. A problem Rengoku was solving with characteristic enthusiasm. "Magnificent timing," he said, without looking up from what he was doing as Yuta appeared beside him. "The demon has MERGED with the locomotive. The passengers are safe for now. The neck is the objective." "I see it," Yuta said. "Can your power?" "Already done." Rengoku looked up. The cursed energy had moved through the fusion point like a solvent, separating Enmu's consciousness from the train's structure without damaging either, unraveling the merger at the molecular level of whatever passed for molecules in a demon's constructed body. Enmu screamed, not in pain, in the specific anguish of something losing its advantage. Rengoku's blade finished the sentence. The train shuddered, slowed. 200 passengers exhaled in their sleep without knowing why. Rengoku stood up straight, sheathed his blade, looked at Yuta with the expression of a man who has just found a new favorite person and has absolutely no intention of being subtle about it. "I like you," he said. "I got that," Yuta said. Every Slayer present felt it before they saw it. Not cursed energy, something older, the spiritual pressure of a being that had existed long enough to become an argument against the idea that strength has limits. Upper Moon 3. Nakaza. He landed on top of the stopped train the way punctuation lands at the end of a sentence, clean, final, without apology. White hair, pink markings catching the last of the dark. Eyes that looked at the scene below and found it interesting the way a chess player finds an unusual opening interesting, not emotionally, analytically. He looked at the Slayers, at the defeated Lower Moon, at Rengoku. Recognition, respect in the way that predators respect each other, not warmly, but honestly. "Flame Hashira," he said, "you've improved since we last met." Rengoku's hand was already on his blade, his eyes burning, his posture carrying the specific weight of a man who has been waiting for this particular conversation for a very long time. "Ikaye," he said. Then Akaza's eyes moved, past Rengoku, to the person standing beside him. And for the first time in the entire exchange, he went still. Upper Moons did not go still. This was not false confidence or performance. 3 centuries of existence had simply removed the category of thing worth pausing for from their experience. They had felt everything, fought everything, reduced everything they encountered to either obstacle or irrelevant. Yuta's energy fit neither. Akaza descended from the train roof slowly, eyes locked, the analytical gaze sharpening into something more focused. "What are you?" he said. The question again, 4th time in this world, always the same 3 words, always from the strongest person in the room. "Someone who'd rather you left," Yuta said. Akaza smiled, not warmly, the way a whetstone smiles at a blade. "Interesting," he said. "I think I'll stay." Rengoku moved first. Flame-breathing 9th form, Rengoku Kagura, the technique that carried every generation of his family's sacrifice inside it, deployed with the full force of a man who understood that some fights are bigger than the people fighting them. Akaza met it, matched it, regenerated through it, because that was the problem, that had always been the problem. The math of this fight, unassisted, only went one direction. Yuta moved on the 3rd exchange. Not to intercept, to change the geometry. Karzid speech. One word, spoken at the precise frequency that bypassed every layer of demon regeneration and landed directly in the motor system. "Stop." Akaza stopped. Not willingly, not permanently, for 1.3 seconds. In a fight at this level, 1.3 seconds was a geological epoch. Rengoku's blade found 3 places it had never found before. Akaza came back online, fast, furious in a way that was different from before, not the analytical fury of a combatant recalibrating, the visceral fury of something that had never been made to stop against its will and found the experience deeply, personally offensive. "What was that?" he said. His voice had changed, the chess player was gone, something rower underneath. "A language you've never heard," Yuta said. "Get used to it." Destructive death, every form, rapid succession. Akaza fighting at full capacity was a different category of problem, not stronger in the way that more water is stronger than less water, stronger the way a storm is stronger than rain, qualitatively different. The air pressure around him changed. The ground cracked under footwork that moved faster than the eye could fully resolve. Rengoku matched him form for form, burning brighter with every exchange. The specific quality of a flame that understands it is F. Innate and has decided to be extraordinary rather than long. Yuta worked the space. Sky manipulation, not a technique Akaza had encountered, had no counter prepared for, had no category to file it under. The air above the battlefield bent, angles changed. Akaza's attacks arrived from their intended direction and found the target had moved without moving, the space between them stretched or compressed by Yuta shifting the geometry of the field itself. Akaza adjusted because 3 centuries, because Upper Moon 3, because adaptability was how you survived long enough to become a concept rather than just a demon. But adjusting took processing, and processing took fractions of seconds, and fractions of seconds with Rengoku beside him were gifts. The three-way rhythm found itself, reluctantly, inevitably. Rengoku creating openings, Yuta warping the field to extend them, cursed speech landing whenever Akaza's regeneration found a pattern. Not winning, not yet, but for the first time in Akaza's 300 years of existence, not winning either. He went for Rengoku. Because Rengoku was the one he understood. Flame-breathing had edges, had limits, had the beautiful, tragic ceiling of human potential, higher than almost anything Akaza had encountered, but a ceiling nonetheless. The cursed speech stranger was a variable he couldn't fully solve. Demons 3 centuries old did not fight unsolved variables if they could eliminate the known quantities first and face the unknown one alone. Rational, cold, completely wrong. Because the moment Akaza committed to that direction, Yuta was already inside the decision. He had read the shift, the weight transfer, the micro-adjustment in Akaza's posture that preceded a commitment strike, not demon slayer instinct, 3 years of learning to survive things that moved faster than thought. Yuta didn't intercept the attack. He moved Akaza. Cursed energy wrapped around the space Akaza occupied and simply relocated it. Not teleportation, not a throw, a reorientation. The battlefield tilting at the level of spatial geometry so that Akaza's committed forward momentum carried him not toward Rengoku, but toward the horizon, toward the east, where the sky had been getting lighter for the last 4 minutes, where the first thin line of gold was beginning to separate the dark from something else. Akaza realized it in the air. That specific moment, the half-second between launch and landing, when the trajectory was committed and the destination was already chosen and the only thing left was arrival. He looked back, found Yuta's eyes across the distance. The sun came up. 313 years. That was how long Akaza had existed, how long since the human underneath had been buried so deep that even he had stopped believing it was there, how long since something in the world had genuinely surprised him. The sunlight found him completely, all at once, no partial exposure, no scramble for shadow, no final speech. Just the math of it, demon plus dawn, an equation with one answer. Upper Moon 3 gone. The field went quiet. Rengoku stood with his blade out, breathing hard, wounds across his chest that would have been fatal in 6 more minutes of that fight, staring at the space where Akaza had been standing. Then at Yuta. His voice, when it came, was quieter than anyone present had ever heard it. You threw him into the sun. Yes, Yuta said. You moved the space he was standing in. Yes, while he was mid-attack. The commitment window was about half a second, had to be then. Rengoku looked at the sunrise, full light now, gold and wide and completely indifferent to everything that had just happened beneath it. Then he laughed, huge, genuine, the laugh of a man who has just witnessed something that will live in him for the rest of his life. Set your heart ablaze, he said, not to anyone in particular, to the morning, to the principle of it. Behind them both, Tanjiro sat on the ground beside the stopped train. Inosuke was eating something. Zenitsu was crying. Passengers were waking up inside the carriages, confused, alive, with no idea how close the math had been. Tanjiro looked at the sunrise, then at Yuta. In the original story, this morning was supposed to hurt. Rengoku was supposed to be gone by now. The core was supposed to absorb that loss and carry it forward, the specific weight of it shaping everything that came after. Instead, the flame Hashira was standing in the morning light, wounded, alive, laughing. Tanjiro should have felt relief, pure, simple. Part of him did. But underneath it, quiet, persistent, the feeling he couldn't name yet, something that understood that changed stories have changed costs, that the weight you remove from one place doesn't disappear, it moves, finds somewhere else to land. He just didn't know where yet. Music dense, layered, urgent, shamisen underneath something modern and dangerous. The Yashiwara district. At night, lanterns bleeding red into smoke, the smell of perfume over something rotting underneath it, beauty wrapped around poison, the way this entire arc was always going to be. Some missions announce their weight before you arrive. Not through intelligence reports, not through core briefings or mission parameters or the careful language of people who document danger for a living, through the specific silence of the people who have been inside it longest. Tenjin Yuzui's 3 wives had been embedded in the entertainment district for weeks, trained, capable, exactly the kind of operatives who filed regular reports and maintained contact and did not go quiet. They had gone quiet. Tenjin arrived the way Tenjin arrived everywhere, loud, certain, draped in the particular confidence of a man who had decided long ago that flamboyance and lethality were not opposites. His axes caught the lantern light, his headband glittered, his chakram could remove a demon's head before the demon registered movement. Yuta arrived beside him, quiet, the contrast between them so complete it was almost architectural. "You're the spirit Hashira," Tenjin said, looking him over once. "Heard about you." "Good things?" Yuta asked. "Terrifying things," Tenjin said. "In this line of work, those are the same." He grinned. Yuta almost did. Above them, somewhere in the layered dark of the most dangerous district in the country, something with poisoned sickles and 3 centuries of accumulated rage was already aware they had arrived. The district breathed around them, unaware, beautiful, dying. The first body they found told them everything. Not a civilian, a demon, small, spider-limbed, the kind of creature that existed in Daki's ecosystem as extension rather than individual, dissolved from the inside, poisoned by something that had turned its own regeneration against it. Tenjin crouched over it, read it the way a musician reads a score, fast, total, extracting information from every detail. "Jutaro," he said, "upper moon 6. The poison signature is his, which means Daki is already engaged somewhere above us and he's already out." "Both at once," Yuta said. "Both at once," Tenjin confirmed. "That's their method. They don't fight sequentially. They fight as a single organism with 2 bodies. You engage one and the other is already inside your guard." He looked at Yuta. "Most Hashira can't handle both simultaneously. It's not a strength problem. It's a bandwidth problem, too much information moving too fast across too much space." Yuta was quiet for a moment. "I can hold the space," he said. "If you take Jutaro direct, I can make sure his angles don't work the way he expects them to." Tenjin studied him, the specific assessment of a former shinobi reading a person for deception, capability, and the gap between what they claimed and what they could deliver. He found no gap. "Flamboyant plan," he said. "I love it. Let's go." Daki came apart first. Not through defeat, through division. The moment Jutaro emerged from her body and took the field himself, the dynamic shifted, 2 upper moons operating as one was their greatest weapon. Separated, they were still upper moons, still catastrophic, but the weapon had a seam now. Tanjiro found Daki's seam. Water breathing and a rage he had learned to channel instead of suppress, fighting for the people in the district who had no idea how close the margin was. Jutaro found Tenjin. And Tenjin, for the first time in this version of the story, was not alone. The sickles came in their signature arcs, poison trails hanging in the air like brushstrokes from a painter who only worked in death. Jutaro's style was overwhelming by design, not one strike, not 2, but a continuous overlapping sequence that gave opponents no breath between the ending of one problem and the beginning of the next. Against a single Hashira, this was a war of attrition, inevitable, patient, the poison accumulating in the blood while the slayer focused on not dying from the blades. Against Tenjin and Yuta, the math stopped working. Here is what spatial defense looked like from the inside of it. Jutaro threw a sickle at Tenjin's exposed left side. The blade traveled the correct distance. The blade traveled the correct speed. Every calculation Jutaro had made, honed across centuries of combat, told him the strike was landing. It didn't land. Not because Tenjin moved, because the space the blade traveled through had been quietly, precisely adjusted by the person standing 30 meters away with two fingers pressed together and his eyes closed. The sickle arrived 6 inches to the left of where physics said it should. Tenjin's axe was already at the position the sickle actually arrived at. The clang of it rang across the rooftops. Jotaro pulled back, recalculated, threw again. Wrong again, different direction, same result. He turned his full attention toward Yuta. This was the intended response. This was the design, an upper moon splitting focus between two opponents across two different threat categories, was an upper moon spending processing power it needed elsewhere. Tenjin hit him 4 times in the next 6 seconds. Deep, purposeful, the strikes of a man who had spent his entire career learning exactly how much damage an upper moon could absorb and how quickly, and was now, for the first time, working with a partner who guaranteed the windows stayed open. Blood demon art, rotating circular slashes. The desperation move, the one that didn't require aim because it didn't have a specific target. Poison arcing outward in every direction, filling the air itself, the district below suddenly breathing something that would stop a human heart in 40 seconds. Tenjin took the edge of it. One breath, that was all. One breath of the poisoned air in his system was already fighting a war on 2 fronts, the external one with blades and the internal one with chemistry. In the original story, this was where the clock started, the countdown, the desperate mathematics of how much a Hashira could accomplish while his body was being systematically dismantled from the inside. Yuta was beside him before Tenjin finished registering what had entered his bloodstream. The reverse cursed technique landed different here than it had on the mountain or in Natagumo. Not reconstruction, not closing a wound. Active combat medicine, positive energy moving through Tenjin's system in real time, not eliminating the poison but staying ahead of it. Buying minutes, then more minutes, turning a countdown into a sustained engagement. Tenjin felt it happen, the specific sensation of a body being pulled back from an edge it had already begun to go over. He processed it in a fraction of a second. Kept fighting. Incredibly flamboyant, he said mid-strike. Focus, Yuta said. I am focused, this is what focused looks like for me. Jotaro was adapting. 3 centuries, the same unbreakable truth that had made Akaza dangerous, that made every upper moon dangerous. Given enough time, they found the pattern, filed it, built a counter. The spatial distortions he was beginning to anticipate, not fully, not reliably, but the edges of compensation were forming. Another 20 minutes and he would have threaded the needle, found the angle that the field manipulation couldn't fully cover, taken Tenjin apart regardless. 20 minutes was not available to him. Yuta had been watching the adaptation, tracking the micro-adjustments, waiting for the specific moment when Jotaro committed to a counter-pattern, the moment where the mind locks into a new solution and for exactly 1 breath stops generating alternatives. The sickle came, Jotaro's most refined throw of the entire engagement, accounting for the spatial adjustment, actually accounting for it, the blade on a true path for the first time. Yuta let it come. Stop. Cursed speech, 1 word, precise frequency, hitting the motor system like a key in a lock. Jotaro stopped. Mid-throw, fully committed, completely frozen. 2 seconds. Tenjin moved on the first, sound breathing, final form, 15 consecutive blows in the space between 1 heartbeat and the next. Yuta moved on the second, the neck, cline, no hesitation. Jotaro came back online to the sensation of an ending already in progress. Too late by exactly 2 seconds. Upper Moon 6 gone. Not the long fight, not the accumulated wounds and desperate final minutes and the question of whether the poison would finish what the demon started, not the cost that the original story paid without flinching. Faster, cleaner, 2 Hashira operating as a system instead of 2 individuals fighting parallel wars. Tenjin landed on the rooftop and immediately sat down, not from weakness, from the specific pragmatism of a man whose body had just done something enormous and was presenting him with the bill. Yuta sat beside him, applied the reverse technique in steady, sustained pulses, working through the remaining poisons systematically. Tenjin watched the process with something that had been moving toward trust since the poisoned air and had now arrived. In the shinobi world, he said, when someone pulls you back from the edge, you acknowledge it. You don't have to, Yuta said. I know I don't have to, Tenjin said. That's not why I'm doing it. He looked out over the district, the lanterns still burning, the music from somewhere below still playing, the civilians inside it still alive in a way they had been 30 minutes from not being. My wives, he said. Already found them, Yuta said. Makio has a dislocated shoulder. Suma is fine, scared, but fine. Hinatsuru's system still has trace amounts of Jutero's poison. I'll see to her before we move. Tenjin stared at him. The sound Hashira, a man who had survived missions that killed everyone around him. A man who had built every wall in his emotional architecture out of pragmatism and forwar. Momentum and the absolute refusal to need anything from anyone. His jaw worked once. Thank you, he said. 2 words, quiet, no performance around them. Yuta nodded, said nothing, kept working. Below on the street, Tanjiro was explaining to Zenitsu why crying in front of civilians was unprofessional. Zenitsu was crying anyway. Inosuke was eating something he had found. Nobody asked where. The district breathed in, out, alive. And somewhere in the deeper dark, far from the lanterns, far from the music, far from the rooftop where a sound Hashira was quietly processing gratitude, something felt the absence of Upper Moon 6. Something that had not felt absence in a very long time, something that would want an explanation. Something that would eventually want to see this spirit Hashira for itself. Muzan Kibutsuji turned away from his window and began to think. Every action has a shadow. Not a consequence. Consequences are things you can trace, point to, say there that moment, that choice, that's where it started. Shadows are different. Shadows move when the light moves. They stretch in directions you weren't watching. They fall across things you didn't know were in the room. Yuta had been in this world for weeks. In that time, Lower Moon 5 gone, Upper Moon 3 gone, Upper Moon 6 gone. 3 members of the 12 Kazuki. Eliminated in the span of time, it normally took the Corps to mount a single successful operation against one. The math of this war had just changed, violently, irrevocably. And math, when it changes that fast, doesn't only affect the people losing. Muzan Kibutsuji had survived 12 centuries by doing one thing better than every other being he had ever encountered. Riding change. Not reacting to it, not responding after the fact. Feeling it coming the way a ship's captain feels a storm in the pressure of the water days before the clouds appear. 3 upper and lower moons in weeks, no remains, no final cursed art discharge. No sign of the extended combat that Upper Moon deaths usually left written into the landscape around them. Just absence, clean, total, the kind of ending that didn't come from a slayer getting lucky. Something had entered his world. He had felt it peripherally, a pressure that didn't match any technique in his 12 centuries of catalogued threats. Not breathing forms, not a demon art, something older than both and operating from a completely different set of physical laws. Muzan sat very still. This was rare. He was not a being that sat still. Stillness was for things that were afraid. He was not afraid. He was calculating. And calculation, for Muzan Kibutsuji, looked identical to fear from the outside. Kaguya Yubayashiki did not celebrate. The other Hashira noticed, said nothing, because they had known him long enough to understand that his silences carried information. 3 upper and lower moons gone should have been the closest thing to joy this work allowed. Progress measured not in years but in generational sacrifice. His family had spent centuries paying the price of this war one body at a time. 3 Kazuki in weeks was the kind of result that should have felt like dawn. Yubayashiki sat at his garden, eyes closed, listening to something the others couldn't hear. He's moving faster, he said. Jiyu standing nearest, Muzan. He hasn't moved like this in decades. Yubayashiki's voice was quiet, precise. the tone of a man reading a pattern in data that everyone else was still busy celebrating. Every time we've accelerated the rate of loss, he contracts, pulls the remaining moons closer, stops experimenting and starts consolidating. He opened his eyes. We've never accelerated at this rate before. Silent. So he consolidates faster, Seimi said. Good, easier to find him. Yubayashiki looked at him, not unkindly. Or he stops waiting for the blue spider lily and moves to end this on his timeline instead of ours. The garden was very quiet. We planned for a long war, Yubayashiki continued. Decades more, perhaps. A war where our people had time to grow, Tanjiro developing his abilities fully, the younger slayers finding their ceilings, the core building depth across many generations of trained fighters. He paused. Yuta has compressed that timeline, not maliciously, not carelessly, simply by being what he is. The question isn't whether that's good or bad. The question is whether we are ready for the war that's actually coming, instead of the one we prepared for. Upper Moon, too, felt it first. Damas sitting in his temple, smiling the way he always smiled, wide, warm, entirely hollow. Processing the absence of Jutaro and Daki the way he processed most things, with aesthetic appreciation for the fact that something interesting had finally happened. The additional blood came without request. Muzan's gift, more of it than Damas had received in decades, rich, dense, carrying instructions inside it at the cellular level. The way Muzan's blood always carried instructions, not words, not images, just imperative. Evolve now, faster than you planned. Damas tilted his head, felt his blood demon art rewriting itself at depths he hadn't accessed in years, smiled wider. Oh, he said softly, something new is here. The same gift moved through the other surviving moons, Upper 1, Upper 2, Upper 4, each of them receiving the acceleration, each of them feeling their own limits pushed outward by a being who had decided that the careful, patient timeline of 12 centuries was no longer the right tool. A faster war needed faster weapons. Muzan was sharpening everything he had left. Not out of panic. Out of the cold, ancient intelligence of something that had survived this long precisely because it never mistook momentum for victory. The water moved wrong. Not the real water, the water in Tanjiro's form. Water breathing required a specific quality of movement, continuous, adaptive. The technique built on the premise that water overcomes obstacles not by matching their strength but by finding every crack, every gap, every place where the resistance isn't total. Tanjiro had been training this for months. His form was good. Yurikodaki had said so. The results in the field confirmed it. But something was off. He ran the form again, stood in the dark for a long time afterward. The problem wasn't technical. Water breathing worked by meeting resistance, by finding the obstacle and moving around it, by requiring the specific friction of something pushing back to find its own shape. In every major engagement since Yuta arrived, there had been no obstacle, not for Tanjiro. By the time he arrived at the point of resistance, Yuta had already dissolved it. His form had nothing to respond to, nothing to sharpen itself against, nothing to find the cracks in. He was training in a vacuum, getting technically better, getting fundamentally shallower. He sat down on the riverbank, put his blade across his knees, breathed. Across the war, across all the victories, across everything that had gone more right than it had any business going, Tanjiro Kamado was falling behind, and for the first time he understood why. He sat down without asking. Beside Tanjiro, on the riverbank, looking at the water the same way Tanjiro was looking at it. Neither of them spoke for a while. "You've been quieter," Yuta said. "I've been thinking," Tanjiro said. "About what?" Tanjiro turned the blade over in his hands once, choosing words with the specific care of someone who has something true to say and isn't sure the truth is fair. "In my world," he said slowly, "the people who became strongest, they all went through something first, something the strength came out of, like the hardness had to go in before it could come out." Yuta was quiet. "You've been removing the something," Tanjiro said. "Not wrong, not cruel. The people are alive who wouldn't be. I know that, I feel that. He paused, but I don't know who I am without it. The river moved, cold, continuous, indifferent. Yuta sat with the words, not deflecting, not justifying. Doing what he had learned across years of being the most powerful person in most rooms was the only honest response to this specific kind of truth. Receiving it. I know, he said finally. You've seen this before, Tanjiro asked. I've been this before, Yuta said, the person other people grew around, the obstacle they never had to face because I'd already faced it. He looked at the water. I thought I was helping. You were, Tanjiro said immediately. And long pause. And it costs something I don't have a word for yet, Tanjiro said. The river filled the silence between them. Honest, clean, moving past and not coming back the way rivers always do and moments always do, and the specific kind of growth that only comes from damage always does. Yuta made a decision on that riverbank, quietly, without announcement. The next fight he would stand beside Tanjiro, not in front of him. He didn't say it out loud, he didn't need to. Tanjiro smelled the shift in him, looked over. Said nothing, but his grip on the blade changed, slightly, the way a hand changes when something it's been waiting for finally arrives. 3 upper and lower moons gone. Muzan accelerating, the surviving Kazuki evolving ahead of schedule, the core moving toward a final confrontation it had decades to prepare for and weeks of actual runway left. A hero who had been protected from every crucible that was supposed to forge him. A stranger who was beginning to understand what protection actually costs. The war had been shortened, the question sitting inside that fact sharp, unresolved, no answer available yet. Was shortened the same as one? Or had Yuta Okkotsu's presence in this world simply moved the ending closer, without moving it in the right direction? The river didn't answer, the night didn't answer. But somewhere in the dark, Muzan Kibutsuji wa finished calculating and had begun to move. There is a difference between a battle and a reckoning. Battles have variables, uncertainty, the possibility that the outcome could go either direction depending on choices made in the moment. Reckonings are different. Reckonings are what happens when everything that has been building, every sacrifice, every shortcut, every consequence of every choice made by every person in the story, arrives at a single point and resolves. The Infinity Castle was not a battle. It was where the accumulated weight of this entire altered timeline came to collect what it was owed. Yuta had changed the shape of this war, shortened it, redirected it, removed obstacles that were supposed to forge the people walking through them. All of that, every single changed moment from the snowy mountain to the riverbank, was present in this building. Invisible, structural, waiting. The core had arrived earlier than Muzan planned, stronger in some ways than he expected, shallower in others than they needed to be. The castle folded around all of them, and the reckoning began. Upper Moon One did not announce himself. Kokushibo was past the age of entrances. 3 centuries as the strongest demon in existence had removed any need for theater. He simply appeared, the way gravity appears, the way inevitability appears, not moving toward Yuta so much as the corridor rearranging itself so they were already in the same place. 6 eyes, moon-marked skin, a blade that had absorbed so much death it had become something past a weapon, a philosophy made metal, the distilled conviction of a being who had chosen this existence and spent 3 centuries refusing to regret it. He looked at Yuta. Not with the predatory hunger that most demons carried, with recognition. Sorcerer, he said. Not a question, not surprise. The word of a man identifying something he has studied from a distance and is now meeting directly. You've heard of us, Yuta said. I was human once, Kokushibo said. Before that, I was a swordsman in an era when the boundary between spiritual power and physical technique was less defined than your world's current practitioners believe it to be. He drew his blade. The moon-breathing forms lived in the movement, not technique applied to a weapon, but weapon and technique becoming a single unified thing that no longer required thought. I have wondered, he said, what a cursed sorcerer fights like. Then let's find out, Yuta said. Rika opened her eyes behind him. First form obscuring clouds. The blade multiplied, not illusion, actual slashes propagating through space at angles that shared no geometric relationship with each other, arriving simultaneously from directions that shouldn't have been accessible from a single point of origin. Against any other opponent, this was the end of the conversation. Yuta copied it. Not perfectly, not immediately, but the cursed energy moved through the pattern the way it had moved through every technique he'd observed in this world, finding the structure underneath the style, extracting the principle, rebuilding it in a language his body already spoke. Kokushibo paused, one breath, 6 eyes processing something genuinely unexpected. Mimicry, he said. Adaptation, Yuta corrected. The second exchange was different. Kokushibo adjusting, the techniques growing more complex, layered, the moon-breathing forms stacking on each other in combinations designed specifically to exceed the copying speed of whatever he was facing. 3 centuries of combat intelligence applied to a single problem in real time. Yuta felt the ceiling, the place where copying stopped being viable, where the techniques came faster than comprehension allowed. He stopped copying and let Rika fully forward. The corridor changed temperature. Every slayer in the Infinity Castle felt it. Not heard, felt in the sternum, in the back of the throat, the specific pressure of something vast becoming present, not entering the space so much as the space suddenly acknowledging it had always been there. Kokushibo looked up at Rika. 6 eyes, all of them fully open for the first time in the engagement. That, he said quietly, is not from this world. No, Yuta agreed. It cannot be reasoned with. No, controlled. Yuta looked up at her, at the vast presence that had chosen, years ago, to stay attached to him. That had moved through every version of terrible and come out the other side as something that destroyed threats not out of malice, but out of the specific devotion that doesn't know how to be anything else. She does what she wants, Yuta said. She just usually wants what I want. Kokushibo processed this, made a decision. The decision of a being who had survived 3 centuries by correctly identifying which problems required technique and which required absolute commitment. He came forward, all of it, every form, every moon-breathing combination, the full depth of T. 3 centuries released at once like a dam that has decided the reservoir no longer matters. Rika met him. The corridor stopped existing as a corridor, became instead a record of every point of contact between a moon and something that predated the concept of moons. Walls folding, space compressing, the Infinity Castle, a structure built to be infinitely accommodating, struggling to contain what was happening inside this one hallway. Yuta worked the edges, spatial manipulation, cursed speech loaded and waiting, looking for the window, the one moment, the 1.3 seconds that had ended Akaza. It was harder here. Kokushibo didn't commit the way Akaza committed. His style was fluid, continuous. The moon-breathing forms designed specifically to never fully arrive, always in transition, always between states, always at the point where freezing meant nothing because the next form was already beginning. 20 seconds, 40, a minute. Then Jaiomai arrived. He came through the wall. Not dramatically. The Infinity Castle's architecture was not built for Jaiomai Himejima's understanding of what walls were for. He went through it the way water goes through a crack, completely, without apology, because the wall had made the mistake of being in the way. Kokushibo felt the shift, adapted immediately, splitting attention between the void presence above him and the stone giant arriving from the side. 2 fronts, upper moon 1, managing both. Still barely, the forms thinning slightly, the combinations a fraction less layered than they had been 60 seconds ago. Yuta saw it. The thinning, the place where 3 centuries of technique was spreading itself across 2 problems and finding the coverage slightly, fractionally insufficient. Not a gap, not yet, the precursor to a gap, the moment before the moment. He loaded the cursed speech, waited, watched Kokushibo's form cycle, learned the rhythm of it, found the beat between the second and third form where the transition required, for exactly 1 breath, a full motor commitment that had no room for simultaneous defensive adjustment. There. Stop. 1 second. Kokushibo Upper Moon 1 frozen in the space between forms, every technique mid-execution, the most fluid fighter alive locked into a single frame. Gyomai's flail was already moving, had been moving before the word landed, because Gyomai Heimjima had fought long enough to recognize the shape of a window even before it opened. The blow landed at the base of the neck, full force. Every gram of the stone Hashira's overwhelming physicality delivered to a single point at the precise moment that point had no defense. Kokushibo came back online. Felt the damage. In 3 centuries, he had never felt damage like this. His blade arm moved on instinct, reflex deeper than thought, but the body was already 1 step behind the mind, and the mind was already 1 step behind what was necessary. Rika finished it. Upper Moon 1 gone. The corridor rebuilt itself around the silence, confused, like a house rearranging furniture after an earthquake and not being sure where anything belonged anymore. Gyomai stood in the aftermath, prayer beads moving, tears on his face, as always, for everything. Thank you, he said, to Yuta, to God, to both. He did not distinguish. Upper Moon 2 smelled different from the others. Tanjiro noticed immediately. Every demon carried grief inside the rot, the human residue, the leftover echo of what they'd been. Even Kokushibo, sealed under centuries of chosen monstrousness, carried something buried and human in the deep registers. Dama carried nothing. Not sealed, not buried, simply absent. The emotional core that every other being, demon or human, operated from was not suppressed in Dama. It had never existed. Tanjiro breathed him in, found no grief, no rage, no love twisted into violence, nothing to understand, nothing to extend compassion toward. Just a beautiful, smiling, perfectly constructed void. The most dangerous thing Tanjiro had ever tried to read, because his greatest weapon was empathy, and empathy requires something on the other side to receive it. The fans came out. Graceful, genuinely elegant, the blood demon art deploying with the casual confidence of someone who had used it so long it no longer felt like power, just expression. Cryogenic ice formations bloomed across the ceiling, the floor frosted, the air filled with crystalline particles that caught the castle's impossible light and scattered it into something almost beautiful. Almost. The particles were also eating through the wall behind Tanjiro, slowly, patiently, the way Dama did everything. Jiu moved, water-breathing, dead calm, the technique that required absolute stillness of mind, every slash neutralized, perfect defensive form, creating a sphere of untouchable space around the user. Dama watched it with genuine aesthetic appreciation. Beautiful, he said, you know I've consumed 3 water Hashira, each O. F them used that same form at the end. He tilted his head. It never works, but it's always lovely to watch. Jiu's jaw tightened, kept the form. Tanjiro came from the right, Hinakami Kagura, the sun-breathing form that had been living in his blood longer than he'd known it was there, heat meeting cold, the 2 forces finding their argument in the space between 2 fighters. Dama redirected, effortless, smiling. 2 Hashira, he said, exciting, it's been decades since I had 2 at once. He paused, the last pair didn't last long enough to be interesting. Tanjiro felt the cold reaching for his lungs, pressed forward anyway. In the original story, Shinobu Kacho had walked into this room knowing she was going to die. She had done the math. Dama was too large, too strong. Her poison was designed to kill a demon she could not physically overpower. The delivery method was her own body. The plan was a sacrifice dressed as a strategy. Yuta had changed the timeline. Not here, not in this moment. Weeks earlier, in the entertainment district, when the reverse cursed technique had pulled Hinetsuru back from Jutero's poison, and Shinobu, studying the technique afterward with the focused intensity of someone who had just seen their entire medical framework gently turned upside down, had spent the following weeks developing something new. Not poison delivered through sacrifice, poison delivered through precision, concentrated, aerosolized, designed to be introduced through a breach rather than a body. She arrived through the ice from above, silent, a needle in each hand, the smile she always wore covering something considerably more calculated underneath. Demal looked up. "Oh," he said, "another one, genuine pleasure. A butterfly, how?" The needles found the junction between his blood demon art's generation point and his regeneration system, not randomly, precisely. The product of 11 years of toxicology research updated in the last 3 weeks by data Shinobu should never have had access to. Demal's fans stuttered. One beat, just one, the ice formations losing their architecture for a single moment. Tanjiro was already inside the moment. This was the crucible. Not Rui, not the hand demon, not any of the fights that Yuta had dissolved before Tanjiro arrived at their center. This one here. Demal recovering, the stutter in his blood demon art closing, the smile returning, because nothing stayed down, because he was Upper Moon too, because 3 centuries of consuming sorrow and converting it to power didn't end from one well-placed needle. Tanjiro felt the cold in his lungs, real now, the crystalline particles finding gaps in his movement, his body registering the conversation between damage and endurance and finding the margin thinner than he wanted. He breathed. Not water, not Hinakami, something underneath both, the breathing his father had danced, the form that had lived in his blood before he had words for what breathing forms were, pure, undiluted. The original thing before it was named or systematized or taught. He felt it align. The damage in his lungs, the cold in his hands, the void where Demal's grief should have been and wasn't, all of it present, real, unremoved. Yuta hadn't been here for this one. Nobody had cleared this path. The obstacle was fully intact. And Tanjiro Kamado, finally, completely, in the way that only happens when the fight is exactly as hard as it needs to be, found the ceiling of himself. And pushed through it. The blade moved in full sun breathing, every form, in sequence, continuous, the way his father had danced, the way the original practitioner had moved when this technique was still a language and not yet a weapon. Demal's smile faltered, not from pain, from something he had never encountered, couldn't name. A presence inside this technique that his void where emotions should be had no category for. The void felt something for the first time. Jiyu came in on the left, Shinobu from above, a second needle, the system already compromised finding the new introduction catastrophic. 3 simultaneous points. Demal's eyes went wide, rainbow irises catching the ice light, processing the experience of something he had consumed 300 years of human feeling trying to understand and never achieved. Surprise, actual, genuine. Oh, he said very quietly, no performance around it, so that's what it. Upper Moon too, gone. The ice fell, all of it, at once, the blood demon art collapsing without its source. The corridor filling with falling crystals that caught the light one final time and scattered it in every direction like the last thought of something that spent 3 centuries trying to feel something and only managed it at the end. Tanjiro stood in the falling ice, breathing hard, every part of him registering the cost, the real cost, pain, exhaustion, the specific weight of having found your ceiling and the knowledge that you will carry the memory of what it felt. I to push through it. He didn't feel robbed. He felt for the first time since Yuta arrived, fully present, fully himself, the hardness that goes in before it can come out, finally, in. Jiyu stood beside him, looked at the falling ice, then at Tanjiro. Said nothing, but his hand briefly, quickly, gone before anyone could make something of it, landed on Tanjiro's shoulder. Which from Jiyu Tomioka was a standing ovation. Somewhere in the castle, Muzan felt them go. Upper Moon 1, Upper Moon 2. In the same night, in the same building, in what should have been his fortress. 12 centuries, he had spent 12 centuries building toward something, the blue spider lily, invulnerability to the sun, the completion of what he had started the night he became the first demon. He had never once, not once, been inside a timeline where 2 of his 4 remaining upper moons ceased to exist before midnight. The calculation he had been running since the first absence, since Rui, since Akaza, since Jutaro, completed itself. Output 1 conclusion. The long game was over, not because he had lost it, because the board had been flipped. The spirit Hashira, the sorcerer from elsewhere, the variable that didn't fit the 12 centuries of data. Muzan Kibutsuji made the decision that 12 centuries of survival instinct had been delaying. He stopped running calculations and moved. 12 centuries walked into the open air before dawn. No castle, no architecture, no labyrinth to retreat through. Muzan had chosen the field himself. This was significant. A being who had survived this long by controlling every variable, every environment, every condition of every engagement. Choosing open ground meant he had decided the controlled variables no longer mattered. He was done managing this, he was ending it. The core arrived around him in pieces, battered, bleeding, the survivors of the castle emerging into the pre-dawn dark like people coming up from underwater. Tanjiro, Jiu, Tenjin, one arm unusable but present, Jaiomai still praying, Seinmi already moving. Muzan looked at them, dismissed them. Found Yuta, and addressed him directly, for the first time. One sentence, quiet, the tone of something that has been thinking about a specific problem for weeks and has arrived at its conclusion. You don't belong in this world. No, Yuta said, but here I am. He didn't fight first. Muzan's opening was never combat, it was erasure. The biological explosion, every cell weaponized, the shockwave designed to remove the board entirely, take the pieces he couldn't outmaneuver and make the concept of outmaneuvering them irrelevant. In the original story, this worked. Bodies, damage that the survivors carried in their flesh for the rest of shortened lives. Yuta felt it building, the same sensitivity that had read Akaza's commitment window, that had found Kokoshibo's transition gap, pointing now at something vast and biological and about to detonate. He moved before it released. Spatial manipulation, not a redirect this time. A container. The space around Muzan compressed and reoriented, the explosion's geometry turned inward, the shockwave meeting a boundary it had no framework for and folding back. Not perfectly, Yuta absorbed the edge of it, the ground beneath him cracked, his ears rang. Rika screamed, not in pain, in the rage of something protective encountering a threat to its person. But the Hashira behind him were standing, all of them, intact. Muzan looked at the space where the explosion should have cleared the field, at the sorcerer standing in the aftermath, at the people still alive behind him. For the first time in 12 centuries, genuine recalculation. This was never going to be a clean win. Yuta knew it, had known it since the riverbank conversation with Tanjiro. The strategy wasn't defeat, it was time. Space manipulation keeping Muzan's attacks from landing with full force. Cursed speech burning through Yuta's voice with each use, expensive, limited, deployed only when Muzan found a rhythm that needed breaking. Rika fully manifested, her presence forcing Muzan to allocate power to defense that he had planned to spend on offense. Reverse cursed technique moving through the injured Hashira in rotation, keeping everyone functional, keeping the pressure distributed across too many points for Muzan to focus. Not winning, surviving minute by minute, making 12 centuries of power fight for every inch. Tanjiro hit him 7 times, Hinakami Kagura full sequence, the sun breathing landing on something that had spent 12 centuries specifically avoiding it, each strike forcing regeneration, forcing expenditure, forcing the vast reserves of Muzan's power to flow toward healing instead of attack. Seinmi and Jiu working the flanks, Tenjin's remaining arm finding angles, Jaiomai arriving at intervals like geological events. Muzan fought with the terrifying competence of something that had genuinely knee. Ver faced this configuration, one human from another world holding a spatial defense that made his strongest strikes land at 60%. A dead girl's love manifested as something that matched him in raw presence. And 11 demon slayers who had survived this entire night specifically because the person who was supposed to die buying them time was still standing. The sky began to change, imperceptibly first, then undeniably, the black thinning, the edge of the horizon finding its line. Muzan felt it. He ran. Not from fear, from 12 centuries of survival instinct overriding everything else. The same instinct that had kept him alive through every generation of demon slayers. The instinct that said, The sun is coming, move, this conversation is over. Yuta closed the space. Not chasing, redirecting. The same spatial geometry that had thrown Akaza into dawn, applied now to something 12 centuries older, 12 centuries stronger, 12 centuries more resistant. It wasn't Klein. Muzan fought the reorientation, poured regeneration into simply existing against the forced geometry. For 17 seconds, he nearly won that argument. Then Tanjiro hit him from inside the spatial field, the sun-breathing landing not on the outside of the barrier but within it, disrupting the regeneration from the cellular level, from inside. Muzan looked at Tanjiro. One moment, the 12 centuries in his eyes, everything he had been before the first demon, everything the first demon had consumed, the human being at the bottom of all of it, buried so deep even he had stopped believing it was there. The sun arrived. Full, complete, indifferent, the way the sun always arrives. Muzan Kibutsuji, gone. The field went quiet, the way fields go quiet after something that has been making noise for 12 centuries finally stops. Count the living. This is what the original story never fully let you do, because in the original, the count hurt. Rengoku, Shinobu, the Hashira who gave everything to buy a victory that arrived before they could see it. Count no. Rengoku standing in the morning light, wounds healing, laughing because he is always laughing with a sound like someone decided joy should be structural. Shinobu alive, sitting beside Jiu with the careful distance of two people who have survived something together and don't yet have language for what that changes. Her hand 2 inches from his, neither of them moving, both of them aware. Mitsuri and Obanai, his serpent's head resting on her shoulder, her hand over his, no words, none needed, the entire history of what they felt for each other present in the simple fact of still being present. Tenjin, 1 arm, 3 wives, the math of that, all 4 of them breathing, the most flamboyant miracle on a field full of miracles. Jaiomai praying tears, as always, for everything lost, for everything against all reasonable expectation, kept. Count the living, feel the weight of the number. This is what Yuta Okkotsu's presence in this world purchased. Not glory, not legend, just people breathing who weren't supposed to. Here's what nobody talks about when they debate the strongest characters. Power levels, technique matchups, who beats who in what scenario under what conditions. All of it misses the real question. The real question was never whether Yuta Okkotsu could survive the demon slayer world. It was what survival costs, what presence changes, what a story becomes when the suffering it was built around gets redirected by someone strong enough to redirect it. Tanjiro never broke over the hand demon, never stood over Rui's fading body and felt the specific weight of an ending that used to be a person. Almost lost something irreplaceable, the growth that only comes from going through the thing, not around it. Yuta almost became the kindest kind of disaster, not malicious, not careless, just too present, too capable, too willing to absorb every hard thing before it could reach the people he'd decided were his responsibility. He learned, on a riverbank, from a boy who smelled like grief and said the truest thing anyone had said to him in years, protection and growth are not the same thing. So he changed, stood beside instead of in front, let Tanjiro find Damaz's ceiling alone, let the fight be as hard as it needed to be, and held the line everywhere else. That balance between shielding and allowing, between strength used and strength withheld, is the thing this entire 2 hours was actually about. Not the battles, not the power scaling, not even the beautiful, completely unhinged image of Yuta Okkotsu throwing an upper moon into the sunrise. The question underneath all of it, what is strength actually for? Yuta's answer earned across every section of this story, not to remove the hard things, to make sure the people who need to face them survive long enough to do it. He didn't just change this story, he saved everyone who was meant to die, and then more. Importantly, he stepped back far enough for the people who survived to become who they were always supposed to be. That's not a crossover, that's not a power fantasy. That's the strongest thing in any world. Thank you for watching the full 2 hours. If this video hit, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, and drop in the comments which moment in this entire timeline broke you the most. For me, it's Jiyu's hand on Tanjiro's shoulder, 1 second, unannounced, gone before anyone could make it mean too much. The strongest people in any story always say the most important things without words. See you in the next one. Final frame, the cold open image, Yuta in the Infinity Castle, Muzan, the moment before impact, but now we know everything it cost to get here, and everyone who got to live because of it.